I'm going to start decking now that I've got my blocking in place. I am going to put a picture frame edge on here, so I put some extra blocking on the ends here that you can see to support that picture frame edge. All right, I've gone back and forth on how exactly I want to put this decking in, and I think I'm going to start in the middle and work my way to the edge so that I have an even reveal on both sides. So what I've done is my decking board is 5.5 inches wide, the first one that I'm going to use, and I already had my center line from when I pulled my string line for my blocking. And so from there I went over 2 3/4 inches to get the width of my board. I'm going to draw a string line down each of these to the other end, and I'm going to keep my board right on that line as I screw it down. So the first one I screw down will be perfectly straight down the middle. One little tip, when I'm doing measurements like this, it's really hard to measure from the end of your tape measure. So I always like to pull some tape out and actually take my measurements from the middle of my tape. And so there you can see I have 2 3/4 to the center, and my overall length there, if I hold this down straight, is 5.5 inches, so I'm spot on there. So again, I'll run my chalk line straight down the middle here to get a reference mark for my first board, and then I'm going to screw it in. All right, this might be a little hard to see here, but I now have a center reference line for my blocking, and then I've got 2 3/4 inch on each side to represent the 5.5 inch board that's going to go down the middle. I ran a chalk line from side to side, so I have reference lines, and now I'm going to screw it in. So I am going to use the camo system today to put the decking on, and what this is, it's a way for me to get hidden fasteners for my deck boards without having a groove or something on the edge, because I'm using pressure treated lumber. I'm not using some sort of composite with hidden fasteners. So what the camo allows me to do is hide my fasteners. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I just think this is a really neat product. I've never used it before, so we'll see how easy this is to do. I just put in my first couple of screws. I lined up my board here in the middle on my marks, and you can see just 2 screws, and this thing's already rock solid. So I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna have any problems with that. So the way the tool works is you line it up with your joist, and it's got a little bit of a clamping action there that holds it in place. You take your screw and you put it in the hole, and it lines it up perfectly. You take your drill with the provided bit, and you screw your deck board in place. It's that easy. I'm gonna do a couple of these, and I'll let you know what I think, but so far, this thing's fantastic. You can see here where I screwed it. You can barely see that screw hole there, and this will all be hidden fasteners when I'm done, which is a look that I really was looking for. One last thing I want to point out with the camo system is not only is it giving me hidden fasteners, but it's also got these little spacers on here. These are about 3/16 of an inch. So when I put it on my next joist and get it lined up, push it into place, it's making sure that my spacing is 3/16 of an inch all the way down. The nice thing about that is I might have deck boards that are a little wonky or curved, and as long as I keep them tight against the previous board, my spacing will be perfect. One other thing to note is you might notice I'm leaving my deck boards a little bit long. I know I said I'm putting a picture frame end on here. I want to make sure that that overhang is absolutely perfect with the rest of the overhang. Once I know what that distance or what that needs to be, I'll cut it straight with a circular saw at that time. It also gives me the opportunity, as you can see on that board down there, it's pretty junked up on the end, so I can move the boards around to make sure that I get the best part of the board on the deck. All right, so I got most of the deck boards on. I need to cut around the post for those, 2 on the ends, complete my picture frame edge here. I'll use a circular saw to cut this perfectly straight once I find out what my measurement is. Overall, I will say this camo product is rock solid. This deck is solid. When I first saw it, I was a little bit worried about the screws and the spacing. Overall, the tool, super high quality. Couldn't be more impressed. These screws are great. The only real issue I had was that some of these boards were pretty crooked and they were kind of snaky. What I found the easiest way to deal with that is to start in the middle, split the curve either one way or another between each end, and then work my way to each end and pull it straight. I found that easier than working from one end to the other, but as you can see, every board is perfectly lined up. It's solid. It doesn't creak when you walk on it, and I'm not sponsored by Camo or anything. I will leave a link in the description for this tool if you'd like to get one for your own. But overall, the way this deck looks with the hidden fasteners, how solid it is, and how perfectly straight these boards are, I just couldn't be more impressed. All right, so you can see this next board. I'm gonna need to trim around these posts to get it to fit in there correctly. I laid my board up next to the post, and then what I'm doing is I'm taking my speed square, laying it just about a 1/16 of an inch, maybe 3/32 of an inch away from the post, just to give it a little bit of gap to expand and contract. And I'm just making a line so that I know where my posts are. Once I have my lines for all the posts all the way down, I'll then figure out how far in I need to cut. Next, I need to determine how far in that I need to cut. And I want this board to actually fit fairly tight. I don't know if I'll be able to leave a 3/16 inch reveal. Otherwise, I won't have enough to screw on the final edge board. This one I'm going to actually fit pretty tight to the board next to it. This lumber is very green. It's still wet. It's going to shrink down naturally over time, so I'm not too worried about it. But what I've done is I've just put this tight up against the post, and then I put my speed square up against the board next to it. And you can see I have about a 1/7 difference there that I need to cut out. I'm going to go ahead and cut this at 1 inch just to give me a little bit of room. This board is a little bit warped and it could be hard to get in here. I want to leave a little bit of a gap for this to expand and contract. I think I'll go with 1 inch. One easy way to get 1 inch line straight against this board is to put your speed square along the edge, put your pencil in the 1 inch mark, and simply scribe a line down. So as I move my speed square, it leaves a mark right at 1 inch. So I'll do that on all 4 posts. Now that I've got all my locations marked, I'm just going to take my time and carefully cut these out with the jigsaw. And you see here, if you just take a little extra time and go slow, you can actually get some pretty decent cuts with the jigsaw. So I wanted to show you that things don't go perfectly the first time every time. As you can see here, I'll have a really nice fit on this post here. Those down there are not fitting quite as well. There is a little warpage to this board. I'll just take some new measurements and notch out a little more for those posts down there. After a little adjusting, I've got a nice tight fit around each post. I'll get this screwed in with my camo fasteners, and then I'll move to the other side and repeat this process. So I do want to show that things don't always go perfect. I started cutting this other side here and got in a little bit of a hurry, and instead of measuring out correctly like I should have, I guessed at a couple of these spots, and the reveal wasn't bad. It was about 1/4 of an inch, but it just looks sloppy. I'm short a deck board anyway. I've got to go to the hardware store and get some more wood anyway, so I decided just to go ahead and try to recut this one. So again, just take your time, eliminate mistakes, really fine-tune your measuring, and it'll come out better in the end. So as you can imagine, I'm really nervous about this picture frame edge. This is the first time I've ever built a deck, much less try to do a picture frame edge. What I don't know is if I'm going to just have a butt joint over here, or if I want to try to miter it at a 45. I think a 45 will look better, but might be biting off more than I can chew. So the first thing I need to do is, I really don't know what I need to do, but I think I'm gonna try to notch around these posts and get the correct overhang for the edge of the deck. And then from there, I can mark a straight line down the edge of my board and then rip these perpendicular pieces to length. All right, I hope you can see this. I'm not an expert. I'm sure there's some sort of crazy way to figure this out. What I really want is a 1 inch overhang on this board. I don't know if there's this fancy formula or a way to do this. I just sometimes try to use common sense and what makes sense to me. So this is the method I'm gonna do. If I mess up, I'll chalk it up to a learning experience, and I'll get another board and I'll try again. What I've done, I've got my deck board up tight against the post, right where I want it. I took my speed square to see how far is it currently hanging out, and it's right at 3 5/8. And so I only want this to hang off 1 inch. So what I'm gonna do is, if I want it to hang off 1 inch, I think I have to take off 2 5/8 inches out of that notch to make it work right. That's what I'm gonna try. I'm gonna see if my reasoning makes sense. If there's a better way to do this that you know of, please let me know. If you think this is a good way, leave me a comment. Let's try it out. I'm not sure if that's the way you're supposed to do that or not, but I gotta tell you, worked pretty good for me. I got an inch overhang. So the next thing I need to do is cut these boards to length, these perpendicular boards to length. I don't have a track saw. I don't even have a straight piece of lumber that I feel comfortable using at this point as a guide. I'm gonna freehand this with a circular saw and see what happens. This board, I'm sure, is not perfectly straight anyway. So if I can follow that line close enough, I'll actually be able to scribe it perfectly to this board. I'm just gonna take my pencil, got one of these square pencils. I'm gonna lay the face of it along my board and draw my line for reference. And that should leave me a nice gap. So I want this to fit pretty tight right now. This wood is very, very green. It's very, very wet still. It's gonna dry out and shrink over time. And as it does that, that gap will increase. So I want this to be a pretty tight fit for right now so that it naturally shrinks to a nice 1/8 inch gap. So I'm gonna scribe my line and then I'm gonna freehand cut this with a circular saw. So I'm taking a couple of seconds to just make sure my saw is set up to the correct blade height. I want this to be maybe a 32nd of an inch below my deck boards. I have some blocking under here that I don't want to cut through too bad. I really want to make sure that I'm not cutting any more out than I need to. From here, I'll start with the plunge cut down here and just really take my time and work my way across this line, and we'll see what happens. So I don't know if I've ever used a circular saw that slow, but I think it worked pretty well. I do have a couple of these pieces here that are stuck just a little bit, just by a hair. I'll just simply use a handsaw to finish cutting through these. And we'll see how we did. Overall, this turned out really, really nice. You can see we have maybe about 1/8 of an inch gap there all the way down. I don't know if it helped describe it and just take my time to cut it, or if just taking a track saw to it would have been easier and making a straight line. Again, I don't have a track saw. I'm using what I've got. Everything turned out really, really nice. Everything lines up really nice, and I couldn't be happier. One last detail before we move to the other side and repeat this process. I do need to top screw this in place. So these screws are going to go through the top. They're not going to be hidden. They don't leave much of a mark. You can see right there. It's just like a pinhead. But I do want them to be all nice and straight and aligned. So I went ahead and snapped a chalk line right on my outside joist. And I marked it every 10 inches so that my screws are all lined up and they all look nice and neat. Most of this is going to get hidden by the rail. Didn't take me more than a minute to do this, and it's just one of those little extra details that make the job look a little bit nicer in the end. All right, I think that's where I'm going to leave off with this video. I do have my picture frame edge on. Turned out really nice. Cut this edge the same way as I cut the other ones. I did just go ahead and decide to do a butt joint instead of a 45-degree miter on the ends. I think it looks pretty good. Turned out really nice. Eventually I'll put some molding or something around these posts. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do for a rail yet, and I'm going to leave this board until a little bit later. I won't be able to finish it now. You can see we're pretty close up next to a tree. The next part of this project is building some stairs up to our road, and if I turn around, building some stairs down to our dock. So be on the lookout for future videos of that, where I put in stairs down to our dock, up to our road. And again, I've never built stairs before, so we'll see how this goes. If you have any comments on how I can do things better, please leave them below. If you like the video, please subscribe for more updates. Thank you for joining.